So you can hear me in the back, okay. My name is David Tompkins, and I'm with the Tuidang Center in New York. The Tuidang Center is a charitable organization. It's a 501c3. It's actually located in Flushing, New York, which is the largest Chinatown in New York City. There are several Chinatowns, but we're located in Flushing, New York, where we have the largest population of people from mainland China. So the reason the Tuidang movement exists is to actually help drive and support the Tuidang movement. It's actually to coordinate the Tuidang movement. The Tuidang movement is many of you are Chinese, so I think many of you know about the Tuidang movement. But for others, the Tuidang movement is a movement that is actually building freedom in China. And in the course of the last 65 years, the Chinese Communist Party has ruled China. And in the process, it has largely used censorship and propaganda to affect the way people think about China and the way that they think about the Chinese Communist Party. So the Tuidang movement exists to actually break that cycle of what we call brainwashing. And so this is the 9 commentaries. And the Tuidang movement largely exists by Tuidang movement really is this book being spread in China. And the result of this book being spread is that many Chinese people actually, after reading the book, want to separate themselves from the Communist Party. So, but this book actually is very, when you give this book to a Western person, it's very different than what they're accustomed to. The way that the book actually presents itself, it has a very authoritative tone. For example, it's not written in a way that Western people is accustomed to the academic way of presenting ideas, the academic way of discourse. It's foreign to that. It's actually written in the way that traditional Chinese intellectual process and thought has been, it's written according to those customs. But actually, the book itself is meant to shake people out of their traditional, actually it's meant to shake people out of their habitual ways of thinking. So it's actually very strong in its tone. And when I give this book to not many, but when I give this book to some Western people, they say, "Oh, it's very different than it's not what I it seems very strange." It is actually. When you give this book at the same time to a person who grew up in the Soviet Union, or a person who grew up in Romania, or a person who grew up in the Ukraine, they actually grab it and they say, that is exactly what I lived. That's exactly right. So it resonates with people's experience who have lived under communism. So that's actually what the book is meant to do. It's meant to help people break out of their ways of thinking. It's meant to actually it's written for Chinese people to help them break out of the brainwashing, the cycle of brainwashing that has taken place over the last 65 So, the 9 commentaries. It was published in 2004 as an editorial series. Late 2004, a newspaper called the Epoch Times, and Chinese is the Dazhuyan. They ran this as an editorial series, one after the other, and shortly after it was published, the book was then printed as a book. Since that time, what happens is that in China, there are many Falun Gong practitioners, actually an estimated 20 million Falun Gong practitioners, who participate as volunteers as part of the Tuidang movement. And what they do is they actually print the book and they distribute it throughout the country to many people. And after they distribute it, they then talk to people and ask them to quit the Communist Party. And so when they collect those statements, they then take them and submit them back. They break through the firewall and they submit them back to the United States. The website where the Tuidang, there's a website, it's called it's part of the Epoch Times, but the Tuidang statements are actually all submitted there. So I'll come back to that in a few moments. But the beginning of the Tuidang movement. So the book, or the editorial series, was published in November of 2004, and the Tuidang movement began on January 1st, 2005. What happened is that there were 50 overseas Chinese people who together wrote a joint statement and published it in the Epoch Times a few days later. And that was the launch of the Tuidang movement. And so since that time, Tuidang statements have been submitted onto the Tuidang website. Many of them are done by Falun Gong practitioners on behalf of people that they collect statements from in China. Okay? So what is the Tuidang movement? The Tuidang movement is really about helping people separate themselves from the Chinese Communist Party. But in the past 12 years, we have collected a total of 230 million statements. 230 million people quitting the Communist Party. So what does that really mean? In the Chinese Communist Party, there's only 85 million people. In the Young Pioneers, there's only 75 million people. And in the Communist Youth League, there's only 75 million people. In the Young Pioneers, there's about 120 million people. But it's not the membership that is the essential point. The Tuidang movement is about helping people renounce the oath they've given to the Chinese Communist Party. So when a child grows up, almost everybody in China, everybody, but almost everybody, when they enter kindergarten, they join the Young Pioneers. But when they join, they give an oath. They don't give an oath to China. They give an oath to the Chinese Communist Party. And when they give the oath, it is something like they swear to give their blood for the CCP. They will dedicate their life to the Chinese Communist Party, and they will never betray the Chinese Communist Party. And that is actually the cycle. That's the beginning of the cycle of brainwashing, where children are taught from a very early age that their connection to the Chinese Communist Party is closer than their connection to their own family. That is, when we talk about Tuidang, what we're actually talking about is breaking that cycle of brainwashing, helping people understand that what they've learned what they've learned is really about serving the interests of the Chinese Communist Party as opposed to what's good for them. And actually, it's also about helping them learn to think for themselves. What we find is that when people quit the Communist Party, when they submit the Tuidang statement, so we say 230 million people have quit the Communist Party, but what we actually mean is that they're renouncing the oath that they've given to the Communist Party. So we have 230 million people, but actually there's about 1.4 billion people in China. And we want all of them to renounce that oath. So in the process, what it's doing is it's actually laying a foundation for the Chinese people. It's laying a foundation for a new China, and it's a China without the Chinese Communist Party. I'd like to read you a section at the very end of the 9 commentaries, just to give you, this is the last section of page, it's a couple of sentences from the last section here. After several decades of brainwashing and suppression, the CCP has instilled its way of thinking and its standards for good and bad into the Chinese people's lives. I'll move ahead a little bit, but to eliminate from our lives the iniquitous doctrines instilled by the CCP, to discern the CCP's utterly unscrupulous nature, and to restore our human nature and conscience. This is the first and essential step on the path toward a smooth transition to a society free from the Communist Party. So whether this path can be walked steadily and peacefully will depend on the changes made in the heart of every Chinese citizen. Even though the CCP appears to possess all the resources and violent apparatus in the country, if every citizen believes in the power of truth and safeguards morality, the evil specter of the CCP will lose its foundation for existence. I'd like to read a couple other sentences just to give you Only without the Chinese Communist Party will there be a new China. Only without the Chinese Communist Party does China have hope. Without the Chinese Communist Party, the upright and kind-hearted Chinese people will rebuild China's historical magnificence. So, the question is that often comes up is the Tuidang movement a political movement? And what I would like to explain is that the Tuidang movement is not a political movement. It helps people quit the CCP, but it is actually a movement to restore the moral nature, the traditional values, the traditional foundation of the Chinese people. And it does that. It helps people break with the cycle of brainwashing by having them quit the Chinese Communist. Actually, it's not really quit. It's to renounce the oath that they gave to the Communist Party. Okay? So the Tuidang movement doesn't offer any political solutions, doesn't tell people what the political how they should shape their political future, what kind of a political environment there should be. It offers no political answers. What it does is it lays a moral foundation. It has people renounce the oath, and in renouncing the oath, they can begin to think freely. They can begin to think critically of the Chinese Communist Party, and they can begin to think for themselves. And that is the beginning. That is the beginning of freedom for Chinese people. Okay? So, with that, actually, I'm going to finish for today. Thank you.